The examination protocols were clear. 48 hours, 1 survival kit, 0 contact with indigenous life forms classified as apex predators. Cadet Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the drop zone, watching the other candidates scatter across the alien landscape like seeds in the wind. The planet designated as Training World 7 looked peaceful enough from orbit. But Marcus knew better. 3 previous examination cycles had resulted in candidate withdrawals, and 1 had required emergency medical evacuation. Marcus adjusted the pack on his shoulders and checked his wrist scanner. The device displayed a topographical map with red zones marked clearly. Those were the territories of the Vorathian ridge stalkers, creatures that resembled a cross between Earth's big cats and something from humanity's deepest nightmares. The examination board's instructions were absolute. Observe from distance only, document if possible, never engage, never approach. Survival meant respecting the food chain, and humans were decidedly not at the top of it on this world. He set off toward a rocky outcropping visible about 2 kilometers to the east. The terrain was manageable, covered in purple-tinted grass that reached his knees and dotted with clusters of crystalline formations that caught the double sun's light. Marcus moved with purpose but not haste. Panic killed more candidates than any predator ever did. By midday, he had located an ideal shelter site. A natural cave formation carved into the base of a cliff offered protection from the elements and a single defensible entrance. Marcus spent the next 4 hours reinforcing the entrance with branches from nearby trees, creating a barrier that would stop the wind, but could be quickly dismantled if he needed to escape. He gathered dried vegetation for bedding, arranged his supplies in organized rows, and even dug a small fire pit near the entrance with proper ventilation. The survival kit provided basic rations, water purification tablets, a thermal blanket, a multi-tool, and a beacon for emergencies. Marcus supplemented this by gathering edible tubers he recognized from his xenobotany courses. They grew in abundance near a small stream about 50 meters from his shelter. He filled his water containers, treated the liquid, and stored everything systematically. By the time the first sun began its descent, Marcus had accomplished what many candidates struggled to do in twice the time. He allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction as he reviewed his work. Shelter secured, water source identified and accessed, food stored for the duration. He was ahead of schedule, ahead of expectations. Perhaps he would even earn commendation marks for efficiency. That was when he heard the sound. It started as a low whimper, barely audible above the evening breeze. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to the emergency beacon on his belt. The sound came again, closer now, and unmistakably distressed. Against every regulation screaming in his head, Marcus crept toward the source. Behind a cluster of rocks, he found it. A Vorathian ridge stalker cub, no larger than a terrier, its hind leg caught in a tangle of thorned vines. The creature's dark scales were matted with dried blood, and its golden eyes tracked Marcus with a mixture of fear and something he recognized immediately as pain. The cub tried to growl, but the sound came out as another pitiful whimper. Marcus should have walked away. The regulations were clear. The risks were documented. Vorathian adults were 3 meters long, possessed retractable claws that could shred combat armor, and were fiercely protective of their young. Interfering with wildlife was grounds for immediate examination failure. He knelt down slowly, keeping his movements visible and non-threatening. The cub hissed, but it was a weak sound, lacking conviction. Marcus could see the problem clearly. The vines had wrapped around the leg in multiple places, their thorns digging deep into flesh. The more the cub had struggled, the tighter the trap had become. Without help, the creature would die of dehydration or blood loss, or become easy prey for scavengers. "Easy there, little one," Marcus whispered, though he had no idea if the creature could even perceive human speech. "I'm going to help you. Try not to eat me." Working with agonizing slowness, Marcus used his multi-tool to cut away the vines. Each snip made the cub tense, but it seemed to understand on some level that he was helping. The thorns had to be removed individually, and Marcus winced each time the cub flinched. When the last vine fell away, the cub tried to stand but immediately collapsed. The leg was badly damaged, swollen to twice its normal size. This was the moment Marcus should have left. He had freed the creature. That was more than enough violation of protocol for one day. But as he looked at the injured cub trying desperately to crawl toward cover, something in his very human nature refused to let him walk away. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around the cub, immobilizing it gently but firmly. The creature struggled for only a moment before exhaustion claimed it. Marcus carried the bundle back to his shelter, his mind racing through the catalog of terrible decisions he was making. Harboring an apex predator cub, using his medical supplies on wildlife, risking not just examination failure but potential dismemberment when the mother inevitably came looking for her offspring. Inside the shelter, Marcus laid the cub on his bedding and examined the leg more carefully. It was badly infected. Without treatment, the creature would likely lose the limb or die. Marcus opened his medical kit. Staring at the antibiotics and wound dressing that were meant to keep him alive for the next 36 hours. "This is monumentally stupid," he told the unconscious cub. Then he began cleaning the wounds. Over the next hours, Marcus fell into a rhythm. He cleaned and dressed the leg, administered carefully calculated doses of broad-spectrum antibiotics, and used his precious water stores to keep the cub hydrated. When the small creature woke, it tried briefly to bite him, but Marcus had anticipated this and kept a firm but gentle grip. He spoke constantly in low, soothing tones, the way his grandfather had taught him to calm injured animals on their family farm. "You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you. We're going to get you better, and then you're going back to your family. Deal?" The cub seemed to listen, its golden eyes tracking his movements with what Marcus could only describe as curiosity replacing fear. When he offered small pieces of his rations, the cub sniffed them suspiciously before accepting. It was a start. By morning, the swelling had reduced noticeably. Marcus changed the dressings, pleased to see the wounds beginning to heal. The cub watched him work, and this time when he reached out to check its temperature, it didn't try to bite. Progress. But Marcus knew the real problem was just beginning. Somewhere out there, an adult Varathian was looking for this cub. The question was whether she would find them before the examination period ended. The answer came that afternoon. Marcus was gathering more water when his scanner lit up with a proximity alert. Something large was approaching the shelter. Something that matched exactly the profile of an adult Varathian ridgestalker. His blood turned to ice. He sprinted back to the shelter, scenarios racing through his mind. He could trigger the emergency beacon, but extraction would take at least 20 minutes. He could try to run, but Varathians could outpace humans easily. He could attempt to use his shelter's barriers, but they were designed for wind, not 300 kilograms of angry predator. The creature emerged from the tree line like shadow-made flesh. It was massive, easily the size of the old Siberian tigers from Earth's pre-conservation era. Its scales were midnight black with iridescent highlights that caught the sun like oil on water. But most striking were its eyes, the same golden color as the cub's, now fixed directly on Marcus with unmistakable intelligence. The Varathian mother approached slowly, her body language radiating controlled aggression. Every muscle was coiled, ready to strike. Marcus stood at the shelter entrance, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cub, hearing or perhaps sensing its mother's presence, let out a high-pitched cry from inside the shelter. This was it. This was where Marcus's compassion got him killed, his body discovered by examination proctors, with a note about following protocols attached to his posthumous failure notice. The mother's lips pulled back, revealing rows of serrated teeth. She took another step forward. Marcus did the only thing he could think of. He slowly, carefully, stepped aside from the shelter entrance. "Your baby is inside," he said quietly, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping she might understand the gesture. "I helped her. She's healing. You can take her home." For a long moment, nothing happened. The Varathian stared at him, head tilted slightly, as if evaluating whether he was a threat, prey, or something entirely unexpected. Then, moving with surprising delicacy for such a large creature, she padded past him into the shelter. Marcus held his breath as he heard the mother's low rumble and the cub's excited chirping response. He half expected the mother to emerge and attack, believing he had harmed her offspring. Instead, what happened next would change everything Marcus thought he understood about intelligence, gratitude, and the space between species. The mother emerged, the cub dangling gently from her mouth. She set the youngster down and looked at Marcus again. Then, deliberately, she reached up with one massive paw and tapped her own shoulder, where a long scar ran through her scales. She made a sound, almost a purr, deep and resonant. Marcus stared. The gesture was unmistakable. She was showing him an old wound, one that had healed. She was telling him she understood. She knew he had helped. What happened next made Marcus question every xenobiology lecture he had ever attended. The mother turned and disappeared into the tree line, but not before making a specific series of low calls. Minutes later, she returned dragging something heavy, a six-legged herbivore, freshly killed. She deposited it in front of Marcus's shelter and looked at him expectantly. "Is this payment?" Marcus asked, shocked. "Are you bringing me food?" The mother made that rumbling purr again and settled down near the shelter entrance. The cub nestled against her side. She showed no signs of leaving. In fact, she seemed to have decided Marcus's shelter was now under her protection. Over the remaining examination hours, Marcus witnessed behavior that would eventually revolutionize humanity's understanding of Varathian intelligence. The mother hunted, bringing food to share. She allowed Marcus to change her cub's bandages. When night fell and the temperature dropped, she positioned her body to provide warmth near the shelter. When smaller predators approached, drawn by the scent of the stored food, she drove them away with barely an effort. Marcus documented everything, his hands shaking as he recorded video and took notes. He had violated every protocol, broken every rule, and somehow ended up safer than he had ever been. The examination board would fail him. They might even expel him from the program. But at this moment, watching the massive predator groom her healing cub while keeping watch over his shelter, Marcus couldn't bring himself to care. When the extraction shuttle arrived, Marcus stood outside his shelter with his pack ready. The Varathian mother watched the aircraft descend with wary eyes but didn't flee. As Marcus walked toward the landing site, he turned back one last time. The cub was standing now, weight cautiously on its healing leg, and the mother was beside it. Marcus raised his hand in farewell. The mother dipped her head in what might have been acknowledgement, and the cub made a sound somewhere between a chirp and a growl. On the shuttle, the extraction officer looked at Marcus with confusion. "Cadet Chen, our surveillance drone footage shows some highly irregular behavior during your examination. You're aware you'll need to report to the board immediately upon return?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, watching the planet shrink beneath them. "I'm aware. You understand you likely failed this examination? That contact with apex predators was explicitly forbidden?" Marcus thought about the cub's golden eyes, the mother's intelligence, the way they had formed an impossible understanding across species. He thought about the fresh meat that now filled his pack, the warmth of the Varathian's body heat through the cold night, the protection she had offered without being asked. "With respect, sir," Marcus said quietly, "I don't think I failed anything. I think I learned what survival really means." The officer shook his head. The board won't see it that way. Perhaps he was right. But as Marcus reviewed the footage on his scanner, watching the moment the mother brought him food, the moment she allowed him near her cub, the moment they had bridged the space between human and predator with nothing but trust and compassion, he knew something the examination board had yet to learn. Humans weren't dominant because they were the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous. They were dominant because they could see past instinct to possibility, past fear to friendship, past survival to something greater. They could look at a creature designed by evolution to kill them and see instead a patient, a partner, a friend. The examination had tested his ability to survive, but Marcus had proven something far more important. He had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't avoiding danger. It was transforming it. When he finally stood before the examination board 3 days later, watching their faces as they reviewed his footage, Marcus felt no fear. They could strip his rank, dismiss him from the program, label him as reckless and protocol-breaking. But they couldn't take away what he had learned in that shelter on Training World 7. "Cadet Chen," the head examiner finally spoke, her expression unreadable. "What you did was dangerous, unauthorized, and completely against established protocols." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied steadily. "It was also," she continued, a slight smile breaking through her stern expression, "the most extraordinary display of xenopsychology and interspecies communication we have ever witnessed in a survival examination. Your footage has already been forwarded to the Xeno Diplomacy Institute. They're very interested in speaking with you." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, you didn't just survive, Cadet. You made first contact with a species we classified as non-sentient, a species that clearly possesses far more intelligence and emotional complexity than we understood. You've opened an entirely new field of study." The other board members nodded in agreement. One leaned forward, eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "Tell us, Cadet Chen, when exactly did you realize the mother was exhibiting gift-giving behavior? That's typically a marker of advanced social intelligence." As Marcus began to explain, he felt the weight he had been carrying since the extraction lift from his shoulders. He hadn't failed. He had succeeded in ways the examination had never anticipated. He had proven that sometimes the most human thing to do was to break the rules in service of something greater. Compassion, understanding, connection. Somewhere on Training World 7, a Varathian cub was healing, its leg growing stronger each day. And somewhere in human space, a new chapter was being written about what it meant to be human among the stars. Not conquerors, not survivors, but bridges between worlds, finding friendship in the most unexpected places. The examination was over, but Marcus Chen's real education was just beginning.